Welcome back. You're still watching Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And now onto our interview with the first guest of the day. I am joined by an APC youth stalwart and ICT expert, Niyi Budimowo, for discussion on jobs and prosperity bill and how President Tinubu can create 50,000 jobs. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Engineer.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, let's begin with the issue of fuel subsidy removal. What impact do you think this can have on jobs?
Well, I think if you oblige me, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the Speaker, Femi Gbajabiamila, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. You started your segment talking about the work the Ninth Assembly has done under his leadership, and of course, distinguished Senator George Akume, our new SGF, right? And I think we're beginning to see a new cabinet shaping up to support the president, and that's a good thing, for Nigeria and ultimately for jobs. One of the first things during the inauguration, I was there at Eagle Square, and I heard him say live that subsidy is gone. As we all know, subsidy was essentially gone long before he became president, because by law, it was meant the subsidy had to expire by June, right? Now, what that means is that, and I think this issue has been discussed extensively in the media, and I think a lot of people have been more educated about what subsidy is and the problems they had brought to Nigeria in terms of ballooning our debt, right, and increasing our debt servicing. What the impact is going to have on jobs, especially in the long term, is that it's going to free up, for the first time, going to free up a lot of additional funds, right, that can be used not for debt servicing now, right, but also for infrastructure. For infrastructure development, for training and capacity development for the young people, and for supporting micro, small, and medium businesses across the nation, right, whether directly or through indirect means. So I think that's the main thing, one of the main things that we're going to be looking forward to, and also, yeah, I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing for us.
All right. So much has been said about palliatives, programs, interventions, but of course cannot be overemphasized. So what do you think government can do to support businesses to avoid job losses?
Well, I think, so if you look at, so we have to be very careful about this. Yeah, I mean, if you pump a lot of money, into the economy very quickly, and, yes, you'll increase economic activity, but that will also drive inflation. Inflation at the moment is about 22%, right? I think, and that's one of the highest we've had for a long time, right? And one of the government's priorities, that I'm sure it is to bring that inflation down to low double digits or even single digits, right? But as was said by one of the former CBN governors, that we need to, if we're going to be providing any sort of palliative or subsidy or anything like that, we should be subsidizing production, right? So I would be looking forward for the government providing palliatives to people, to companies and people that are creating jobs and are producing goods and services that we can export and
What kind of palliatives would you advise?
Well, I think first of all, I think things like tax incentives, right? That's a form of palliative, right? So, if you think about it, there's genius in that, in the sense that you are, someone that's already paying tax is already being productive, right? It's already in the tax net, right? One of the perennial issues in Nigeria is that a lot of people are outside the tax net and are not able to, they're not paying taxes, they're not supporting the growth of this country, directly through the tax pool, essentially. So by providing tax incentives, you are ensuring that more companies are compliant with taxes, and then you are reducing the tax burden on companies that are already paying taxes and already creating jobs and are growing. Another form of palliative would be, providing additional subsidies for people that are essentially in the transportation sector, because transportation, a major part of our economic activity, it's any disruptions or short-term shocks in that transportation would reflect in food prices. Food prices, as I'm sure you and many other Nigerians family know, have shot up in recent years. So Nigerians are looking for these things to come down. We're already seeing some commodity prices come down with aviation fuel and even gas, and already coming down because of market forces and things like that. And even so, providing additional subsidies and support to businesses would be a good thing.
So all of this discussion in the past few days boils down to revamping the economy.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what other economic challenge do you think the president needs to address to revamp the economy?
Well, I think the biggest, and I'm not going to mince my words, the biggest existential threat, or one of the biggest existential threats that faces our economy is this unemployment. Unemployment is extremely high at the moment. We have the agency that is charged with measuring it and disseminating that information officially, National Bureau of Statistics, has published some figures. The latest figures show that there is at least about 33% direct unemployment in Nigeria and about another 22% in underemployment, people that are working less than what their capacity, less than 20 hours a week, right? That, in numbers, is going to about almost 50 million people. So if you think about it, it's very hard for a lot of people to fathom the fact that there are about 50 million people that are below, they're either unemployed completely, and they're actively looking for work, right? But they cannot find a job or are able to find some sort of work, but it's just very, it doesn't, allow them to fulfill their potential. So if we're trying to, in the Renewed Hope manifesto, there's a line item there where the government, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, when he was campaigning, had said, that the goal is to drive GDP growth up to about 10% annually on a sustained basis, right? It's a high number, but it is feasible, right? But if the right policies and systems are in place. Now, if we don't tackle unemployment, if we are not, and they are all related. So you have GDP growth. If it's suppressed, and economic activity is suppressed, you also have it's correlated with high unemployment, right? But unemployment is something that we can measure very easily at a granular level, both at the federal level, state level, and even the local government level. And if we are not measuring these things at these granular levels, we will not be able to tie our policies at these levels of government, at these various levels of government, and their effect on unemployment. So one of the things I'm hoping that they will do with this new proposed job and prosperity bill is provide some sort of legislative backing, and incentives for jobs to be created and jobs to be monitored, and measured and published at the granular level, right down to local government level.
All right, let's take a break. But when we come back, we will go back to the issue of unemployment, but streamlining to youth unemployment. All right, I've been speaking with Niyi Bodimowo, an APC youth stalwart and ICT expert. We'll take a break and I'll be right back. Welcome back and thank you very much for staying with us. You're watching Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And I have in the studio APC youth stalwart and ICT expert, engineer Niyi Bodimowo. Tonight, we're taking a look at jobs and prosperity bill and how President Tinubu can create 50,000 jobs. All right, before we went on that break, we were talking about unemployment. But now let's bring it down to youth unemployment, which remains a challenge, a big challenge. And the president has promised to work with youth. I mean, he said he believes that the more job opportunities are presented to our youth, the less some of them will be tempted into illegal and dangerous activities. Let me ask you, how do you think the president should go about this?
Okay, so youth unemployment is, when we look at the figure, the grand figure, about almost close to 50 million people unemployed, right? A large proportion of that is the youth. And as you go down the age range segment, from maybe 35 to 45 down to 25 to 35, down to 15 to 24, you find that an increasing proportion of that, or those youth populations are unemployed. What that means is that as we progress across the years and more young people, get into the working age bracket, there are fewer and fewer jobs available for them, right? Clearly, government cannot employ everybody, otherwise we'll become a civil service nation, right? Government, can't even, just not enough jobs, not enough vacancies to employ as many people as is needed, right? So one of the things that we need to do is, first of all, understand that we have a big target, right? It's not about creating 1,000 jobs or 100,000 jobs. We are talking about to move the needle from that almost 50 million people down to about 25, or even down to maybe 10. It's a monumental effort, but we need to focus on it. So right now, there are some building blocks that we need that are essential for unemployment to reduce. One is we need to build our infrastructure, right? Which over the last 8 years, the last government has done quite well in building infrastructure to enable smoother logistics across the nation. We're building about almost over 8,000 kilometers of new roads across the nation and railway and things like that, right? Then we also need to start building, our capacity training and capacity development on a large scale. Adult education, STEM investment, business vertical support. Focusing on our maritime industry. It's a large, it's a big problem in the maritime industry right now, where there are not enough people to fill the jobs because they're highly skilled industry. Agriculture, investment in that. Our key components of our economy or our GDP: agriculture, manufacturing, and services. Right, those areas need to specific focus. So the ultimate goal is to say, look, as we are trying to drive business formation amongst the youth. In other words, we want young people to start their own businesses, right? Business formation, business expansion, and job creation. That business formation, we need, if you think about it, when we're in school, one of the things they first taught us about, business, about production is that, there are 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. One thing we all know in Nigeria, that we are not short of entrepreneurship. There are a lot of entrepreneurs in Nigeria, Absolutely. People with great ideas. We have extremely large amount of labor, right? Young people that are ready and able to work, right? We have land, we have, these are natural, we have lots of natural resources, which is essentially related to land. One recurring decimal that seems to be a shortage is capital, right? So everybody, I'm sure everybody knows, everybody listening right now knows someone that said, I had a great idea, but I don't have money to start it. And that's where it stops, right? In other countries, you can do, sometimes you just walk into a bank and give them a business plan and they give you a loan. I have people that have told me that Nigerians have gone abroad and they've said they've had an idea, gone to a bank and, they told them write a business plan. The next thing they gave them maybe $5,000 loan and they've done their work and their business. So that's a bit, it's not how it is over here, as we all know. So there are some programs right now that are coming into Nigeria, like, through the Nigerian Startup Act. They're bringing lots of money, about $600 million of new investment from the African Development Bank, Agence Française de Développement, and the Islamic Development Bank that's focused on the digital economy, tech businesses, tech-enabled businesses, and creative sector, right? Those kind of investments are coming in. We need to ensure, and this part is very critical, that these monies are disbursed in such a way that we are trying to optimize for the number of businesses that we are supporting, rather than the scale of the businesses that we are supporting. So we don't want to be picking winners and say, let's say that we shouldn't optimize for billion-dollar companies, like maybe 10 numbers of billion-dollar companies, right? That shouldn't be our measure for performance. It should be, look, how many businesses did we support? Even if they are just, their total turnover is $1 million or $2 million a year, right? That is fine, because those are jobs that they are creating, and they are keeping people in employment and out of the streets, and they are keeping us safer, right? So one key takeaway is that everything we are doing in terms of like empowering people should be optimized for scale to support lots of people, because we have a lot of jobs to create, even down to government procurement, right? I'm privy to something in America whereby, if you go to, they have this website where they list all their government procurement contracts. And when you sometimes just go and look at it and just out of interest, see what's going on there. And you just find out sometimes there'll be a contract and they'll write or tender and they say, this is the earmarked for minority businesses only, minority-owned businesses, or women, or some other group. But we need to do that, but more of that, to ensure that, look, we are providing, because government is the biggest spender in Nigeria, that, look, government, as you are spending all this money, right, please try and make sure that you are taking care of the young people, right?
All right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about jobs and prosperity bills that the president intends to use to provide policy framework to encourage light industries. Can you throw more light on that? Okay.
So the first time a lot of people, most Nigerians, heard about the jobs and prosperity bill is during the president's inaugural speech, right? This tells you that it's not as if they've dotted the I's and crossed the T's. It's an aspirational bill, right? So at this point in time, because we know the policy direction of the government, that, look, we want to create a bill, and the government has already identified that, job creation and prosperity and increasing the standard of living is the number one priority, right? We have to now, continue. We as young people, whether we are politically inclined or business inclined or whatever it is, we need to ensure that we are speaking out to say what we want, right? So I've said, look, one thing that got in that bill should be in that bill is specific support for young businesses to ensure that there are incentives and mandates for government agencies and for even businesses, incentives, right, to support jobs, right? So even if you're not, there's some businesses that are not labor intensive, right? But they they generate large amounts of cash, right? What kind of incentives can we provide to them to ensure that maybe they are also helping to fund business support organizations like, hubs, digital libraries, empowerment schemes, right? So that essentially we always have capital being available to young people that want to start up their own businesses. I think that part is very critical, and it should be enshrined in that bill. Mandates and incentives for businesses and agencies to support job creation and to measure it. And in every single policy that's coming out of every government agency, every regulation, there should be a way to say, look, same way that you have environmental impact assessment, to say, look, what is your job impact assessment? How many jobs these policies that you've created now, how many net new jobs is it creating? Is it destroying jobs, or is it creating it? And the first step is even measuring how many jobs are within your domain, whether local government, state, or federal. So I'll just tell you a few numbers. Right now, in the state with the highest number of employment, lowest unemployment is Ogun State. It's about 20%, right? And on the other hand, you have states like maybe Imo and that have extremely high unemployment, right? All this information published by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. So each of these states has peculiar interests, right? And they need to be able to focus on those employment figures and make sure that they're moving the needle. And the incentive needs to be there from the federal government to the state governments to ensure that they are actually doing that, so that in aggregate, the GDP will increase. And this aim of 10% GDP growth can be achieved. Because if we don't measure these things, what you sometimes have a lot of vanity policies, right? Where it all sounds good. We're doing this, we're doing that. But it's like what we call motion without movement. It sounds good. You go and make presentations, but when you come down to it, you are not creating jobs. In fact, sometimes you're actually destroying jobs. So if we must measure accurately and at granular level down to local government level. It's very important.
All right, so because you say this is an aspiration bill, am I right? Okay, so are there any challenges the government may face in bringing this to reality?
Well, I don't think there will be. Okay. I think we are dealing with a very astute politician in the president. He's been, in this political scene for many years, for many decades, right? And then he's a Democrat. He's working closely with the National Assembly, and I think generally speaking, when you even watch some of the initial discussions that they're having in the State Council chamber, you can see that he has essentially taken off the toga of partisanship and becoming, and has put on the cloak of statesmanship. They say, look, governors, whether you are APC, PDP, NMPP, ABGA, or LP, let us work together for the good of this nation, right? And I think that's a good, that's a good sign. It's a good sign.
Fantastic. Now, the president promised to create 1 million jobs in the digital sector of the economy. What comparative advantage do you think Nigeria has in the technology sector to achieve this?
Okay. So 1 million jobs, personally, I think we can do a lot more than that. I think, maybe they're being conservative, right? If you build bottom up, we'll support it. But I've been in the tech sector for pretty much all my life, right? That's what I read in school, and that's what I've been doing, running software businesses. And I've seen firsthand the amount of talent, the variety of talent that we have here in Nigeria, right? To support, and we're even seeing it now, that young Nigerians, even the ones that are based here, are working, in an outsourcing capacity with organizations around the world, from Japan to America. I see them all the time, right? So that is working. And we've also seen that based on the last economic reports, the tech sector, digital economy, has contributed about 18% to our GDP. So that's a great thing. So what we need to do now is to continue to support those businesses. I talked earlier about the Nigerian Startup Act. That's the opportunities that are in there. The government needs to take that as a priority one. And another thing that's very important that we haven't spoken about and extremely important is the Continental Free Trade area.
All right, we will talk about that when we come back from this commercial break. Please stay with us.
All right.
Thank you very much for staying with us. You're watching Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And I still have with me Engineer Niyi Bodimowo, APC Youth Stalwart and ICT experts tonight to discussing jobs and prosperity bill and how President Tinubu can create 50,000 jobs. Please go on with your line of thoughts.
Okay, so before we went on break, I was talking about the AfCFTA, African Continental Free Trade Area, right? So just quickly, free trade area is like essentially the continent of Africa, and is an agreement that we can now trade amongst ourselves easily without the very minimum or zero tariffs, right? It's kind of like what an earlier version of what you have in the EU, where they have a common market and full economic integration. But we are going on that path, right? So what that does, in fact, interestingly, 7 years ago till today, on the 7th of June 2019, former President Buhari signed, and Nigeria ratified its membership, the AfCFTA, into our law, right? And since then we haven't really seen much progress.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Exactly, and I think before I don't belabor reasons why, but we know that trade has occurred. Last year, Kenya started, I think, the first trade, exporting tea to Ghana, right? These are large. There are opportunities for Nigerian youths to expand beyond Nigeria, to start to trade more with all our other African countries. The scale of that trade is about $560 billion and of African imports, and only 12% of that is done within Africa. So African countries are only importing about 560 billion. Only 12% of that is from other African countries. And what are we importing? Things like automobiles, computers, phones, clothing. There are some of these things that we actually have a comparative advantage in our textile industry, in our own manufacturing of engineering equipment, and even computer repair and things like that, right? And also, you now look at services. Like we have a growing software industry. We have a growing content creation and entertainment industry. So the government needs to focus on increasing awareness, ensuring that our young people are aware of these opportunities in other countries, and establish trade desks across all these African countries so that opportunities that are available are brought to our knowledge and we are able to exploit them easily.
All right, so constant electricity is crucial to job creation, as said by the president in his inaugural speech. What options are available for Nigeria to boost power supply?
Well, I think we're in Lagos here. We know I think Lagos has been one of the champions for modular electricity production, right? Off-grid power, solar, things like that. And I think the era of large-scale projects, because we're a large nation, we've been building new dams, but as we are growing, our electricity needs are increasing. So, but we need to ensure that more of our states are able to generate their own power and distribute it easily. We need to sort of I don't want to use the word break apart, but essentially increase competition within the distribution leg of the distribution leg of the chain. And also, one thing that we also need to keep in mind is that.
How does the government do that?
Well, first of all, let's take it straight. There's a new electricity is now something that is now on the concurrent list, right? So that state governments can actually generate, right, and they can license organizations to generate, right? So that's the first step. So you now have the power, right? So you can license new ones. Then you can now also, establish an area, maybe an estate or something like that, and ensure that that distribution within that cell, right, is done by an organization, and so those kind of structures need to be put in place all across, the states. And that's
another critical sector, another critical issue is security. What do you think needs to be done to make the country more secure?
Well, the president was at with the NSA and at the NIA building recently, and they talked about intelligence, right? Data gathering intelligence. It's very critical. It's the first leg. So we need to have, apart from signals intelligence, we also need to have more human intelligence. We have more people trained to support our security forces. In Lagos here, we have our own neighborhood safety and security agency. I'd like to see more of that across the other states. I don't think the federal government should necessarily lead the drive on this, right, for better state security. I think the state should lead the drive, but through the leadership of the government, of the president, sorry.
All right, thank you very much, Engineer Niyi Bodimowo, APC Youth Stalwart and ICT experts, tonight to discuss the Jobs and Prosperity Bill and how President Tinubu can create 50,000 jobs. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you very much for throwing more light on this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So good to have you.
Thank you, everyone.